Major funding for this program has been provided by the National Endowment for the Humanities. Additional funding has been provided by the National Science Foundation, supporting education and research in science, mathematics, and technology. The Arthur Vining Davis Foundations, and the American Architectural Foundation.
This is a plaster cast of a man writhing in agony as he suffocates, buried alive in burning volcanic ash. Thousands of people died this way in the Roman city of Pompeii one August day in 79 AD. This entire city was smothered beneath a 12-foot blanket of ash that fell from Mount Vesuvius, still haunting and threatening above the Bay of Naples. Nearby, Herculaneum suffered a different but no less horrible fate.
It was buried beneath a sea of volcanic mud. But this tragedy managed to leave its own memorial. Pompeii and Herculaneum stayed buried for more than 1,600 years. And when excavations began, they revealed a picture of everyday life in one of the world's most influential civilizations. Of Roman cities can be found across 3 continents, visible proof of the impact of this ancient culture of city builders. In fact, much of what makes up our modern cities, the grand public buildings, theaters and stadiums, the way streets and blocks are laid out, even municipal water supplies, all have their roots in ancient Roman cities.
To the Romans, the city was more than a collection of bricks, blocks, and buildings. It was the center of their culture. Legend has it that Rome was founded near where I'm standing by Romulus and Remus, 2 young princes cast out to die by their jealous uncle, but saved and nurtured by a wolf to fulfill their destiny. The guiding spirit of Romulus was never far from the hearts and minds of those who built Rome's cities, which eventually stretched from one end of the Western world to the other. By the time of Jesus, the Romans controlled much of Europe and the Mediterranean. Rome built its empire through alliances, treaties, and military conquests. And until the empire began to collapse around 400 AD, its provinces and territories contributed heavily to the wealth and status of the city of Rome. This is a model of Rome at the height of the empire, about 300 AD. It gives us a good idea of the size and complexity of this fabled city. And like most modern cities, ancient Rome was noisy, congested, and expensive. It boasted a population of over 1 million, far larger than any other city in the world. It was the place to live, a symbol that all Romans held culturally and spiritually dear. And wherever they settled, they tried to recreate the best aspects of Mother Rome.
Structures like these were built from Spain to the Dead Sea, from Britain to North Africa. And they were built to last, first in cut blocks of quarried stone, later in brick-faced concrete. Romans came not just to conquer, but to stay. And the cities they built would alter the character of the land and the world of its people forever.
To the Romans, a well-planned city, like Nîmes here in southern France, began with its layout or grid, which time and sprawl have erased. But this is what it would once have looked like. Virtually all Roman cities were laid out in this regular pattern of streets and blocks, with the major public buildings located in the center, or forum. Now, each city needed certain things: houses, markets, and shops, aqueducts or some system for bringing in fresh water, baths and playing fields for the body, temples for the soul, theaters and amphitheaters for entertainment. And a city also needed walls. Walls, like these at Pompeii, set the geographic limits of the city and offered defense against enemies. And just inside the walls, a sacred trench called the Pomerium defined the spiritual boundary of the city and assured the protection of the gods for all its inhabitants. To the Romans, the wall and the Pomerium were the dividing line between order and disorder, between culture and chaos. The gates in the walls lead to the main streets, which in turn open onto the Forum. The Forum was the focal point of commerce and local politics. As you can see, it's still pretty much the center of things. Along this side of the Forum of Pompeii was a large market called the Macellum. Next to it, another market just for the sale of cloth. Across the way, the large basilica, which housed the courts of law. There was a speaker's platform and the other main government buildings. Dominating the entire space was the temple of Jupiter, Juno, and Minerva, which symbolically and spiritually linked this city with Rome itself. If I were standing here 2,000 years ago, I would have been surrounded by a two-story colonnade that provided shade for the throngs who came here daily. The Forum was the heart of the city, physically connecting it to the surrounding farmland, and in turn linking the entire region with Rome.
The spread of Roman cities affected all the regions they touched, whether the local inhabitants liked it or not. This was particularly true in France, an area the Romans called Gaul. The Celtic people of Gaul were forcibly subdued in a campaign led by the most famous Roman of them all, Julius Caesar. He was eventually succeeded by his nephew Augustus, who tied Gaul more closely to Rome, especially through new cities built on the sites of Caesar's victories.
Our story begins in the year 27 BC. A generation has settled the dust of conflict, but not the bitter memories. And a town we're calling Verbonia is beginning its new life as a city of empire.
My friends, ever since Julius Caesar came, our lives have not been our own. He burned our land, killed our sons and carried off our women. He humiliated our leader, the great Vercingetorix, bringing him in chains back to Rome. And at Uxellodunum, our last stronghold, he cut off the right hands of our warriors.
Here they come, Marcus Abricius. Caesar Augustus's legions, now beginning new lives as merchants and farmers in the midst of this Celtic wilderness.
But with the help of the gods, Verbonia will soon rival any city in Gaul and reflect the glory of Rome herself.
As long as the Celts keep the peace and do not plague us with their mischief.
And if they do, they shall feel the might of Rome yet again.
Ah, Turia, you are here. Come, let us greet our citizens, as befits the new leader of his community and his gracious wife.
Gaius Valerius was one of Augustus Caesar's greatest generals. And when the emperor honored him with leading the founding of this new colony in Gaul, the general so honored me, a humble military engineer, with the task of overseeing its construction. I only hope I can prove a worthy architect.
Build it strong, Marcus Fabricius. It is our first line of defense if we are ever threatened.
Though he's laid down his sword, Gaius Valerius still thinks with the common sense of a general.
Careful, you fools. Careful. Careful!
The esteemed Licinus is himself of this land. He had been Julius Caesar's slave, then Caesar freed him. Now, he's procurator of all Gaul, representative of Caesar Augustus himself, and a figure of universal respect.
The insufferable low-born slug.
I hope you have a better set of plans this time for me to bother coming out in this heat.
I trust you will find these satisfactory. Marcus?
My slave, Lorenz, was a gift from Gaius Valerius, demonstrating, I'm sure, his great esteem for me.
As in every Roman town, Verbonia will have an orderly arrangement of streets and blocks that will lay out nicely along the river. Here we have the Forum, the Market, the Bathhouse, and the Basilica.
And here's the one you specifically asked for, Procurator. A theatre for the entertainment of the populace.
And you make certain my statue is prominently displayed? Above the stage?
Oh, yes, certainly. The sculptors are carving it now.
Personally, I'm looking forward to the time when we can build an amphitheatre for our gladiators and have some real drama.
Well and good. But the city's first priority must be houses. I trust you are making your assignments with the proper people in mind.
We have saved you a prime plot within the city, as well as a large estate in the hills beyond.
I should hope so. I also trust you are now enlisting the aid and goodwill of my native people in your efforts to build the city.
Yes. My engineer, Marcus Fabricius, is paying a call on the Celtic leader, Acco Bouviax, tomorrow.
Acco Bouviax had a formidable reputation.
Wonderful neighbors, these Gauls. Not everyone would think to put skulls in a doorway.
They're from my father's time. We haven't done much of that lately. Now, what is it you wish of me and my people?
Acco graciously extended the courtesy of his house. Before long, we were able to strike a bargain. He would provide a sufficient number of skilled craftsmen, and they in turn would receive a year's free use of the Verbonia docks. Now, your fine ironwork will be seen all the way to Egypt, and merchants will come from far and wide, offering you trade. Acco also introduced me to his lovely daughter, Aidan, of whom he is most proud. She has a proper and gratifying respect for her father, and if she were only a Roman citizen, she might make a fine wife.
Father, I think you like having the Romans here.
I do not like having the Romans here. When I was your age, I fought the Romans. But that was the past. We have to look to the future, and like it or not, the future is with Rome.
Not everyone agrees with you.
You're not speaking of the Druids, are you?
And if I am?
You had better not be mixed up with the Druids. Did you hear me, Aidan Bouviax?
Romans spanned the sacred river. Now they are destroying our way of life. All of our gods are angry. We must never forget what has been done to to us.
With Akko's help, construction of the town has progressed rapidly.
The bridge is burning! The bridge is burning! The bridge is burning! Bring the horse to water! Okay!
What a terrible accident.
Yes.
Perhaps it was no accident at all.
Perhaps you are mistaken.
Let us hope so, for everyone's sake.
This is the Pont du Gard, a 2,000-year-old aqueduct near Nîmes in France, which has become one of this country's most popular attractions.
A critical priority for any city is a constant supply of fresh water. And the covered trough at the top of the Pont du Gard was once part of a 30-mile-long aqueduct that brought water to Nîmes from high up in the mountains.
The key to aqueduct design is gravity. Once the engineers located a source of water in the mountains, they built their aqueduct with a gentle downward slope to ensure that the water would flow along its entire length. The aqueduct rested on a series of arches which were supported above the varying terrain on massive stone piers. But when the aqueduct had to cross a river or a ravine and it became either impossible or impractical to build those stone piers, the engineers instead built larger arches. And if necessary, they built several larger arches, such as we see here at the Pont du Gard.
An arch is composed of separate wedge-shaped blocks that are cut and fitted together in a curve. The blocks are held in place by a wooden frame until they are locked together at the top with a keystone. The weight of the arch at the top presses down and pushes the sides outward. But when you support these sides, the outward forces are counteracted. Now the wooden centering can be removed because the entire structure is stable. And with this design, the Romans could span almost any terrain. The Romans didn't invent the arch, but once they understood its potential, they used it again and again to span both interior and exterior space and to carry water literally hundreds of miles if that's what was needed. When water from an aqueduct reached the city, it first went to a large holding tank or reservoir, like this one at Pompeii.
Now the water entered the tank from this side. It flowed across the floor through these three channels and out through these three passages. This one led to the homes of the rich, that one to the baths and public lavatories, and this one to the public fountains. Now, if there was a shortage of water, the passage to the homes of the rich would be shut off first, then the passage to the baths and public lavatories. This ensured that the public fountains, which served the majority of the city's residents, would be the last to run dry.
That, at least, was the theory.
Here's one of the many public fountains that line the streets of Pompeii and where most of the city's residents got their water. Of course, none of them work now, but providing water for drinking and cooking was one of the municipal services expected of a proper Roman town. There was even a sophisticated drainage system that channeled wastewater to rivers or the sea. This level of sanitation wasn't equaled again for almost 2,000 years. Another Roman priority was the bathhouse, which was far more than just a place to get clean. Bathhouses, or thermae, began with subterranean passages containing furnaces and pipes to carry the water to the rooms above. Slaves would have stoked these fires continuously to heat the water for the hot room, or caldarium. Bathers would luxuriate in hot water pools like this one, cleansing their bodies and presumably their minds as well.
The hot water and steam were carried through clay pipes in the floors and walls that warmed this room and the next, the tepidarium, where the water and room temperature were kept comfortably warm.
And if you wanted a refreshing cold water plunge, you would go to this room, the Frigidarium.
In the baths, you'd meet with friends, discuss business or politics, work out, get a rub down, or just escape from the cares of the day.
We've been in the main bathhouse at Ostia. Both men and women would use these elaborate facilities, although not at the same time. And of course, we've only been talking about affluent citizens. The working classes would rarely have had an opportunity to enjoy the baths, or much else for that matter. They'd have been far too busy just keeping them functioning, along with everything else that made these cities work so well.
There has been so much progress in Verbonia, I can hardly believe only a year has passed. We're experimenting with reservoirs fashioned out of concrete.
And what exactly is concrete, Marcus Fabricius?
A mixture of stone and cement, which can be molded to any desired shape.
Extraordinary.
It was demonstrated to me by an engineer from Rome. A wooden support is erected and brick reinforcing arches are constructed over it. The entire structure is lined with flat bricks and wooden forms and then covered with this concrete. When the concrete hardens, we will repeat the process over and over until the entire reservoir is complete. It can be molded to any shape, yet will retain the strength and solidity of stone at a fraction of the weight and cost.
What will you Romans come up with next?
Many people live in completed houses. And for the first time in my life, I have a house of my own with all its comforts. And this garden in the back lets in much sunshine and takes advantage of the cool breezes.
One could get lumbago from these drafts.
Lawrence, you are always complaining.
Praise the household gods. He always provides me with ample to complain of.
Someday, when I can afford it, I shall have a proper slave. With my new elevated status in life, I can partake in luxuries I could only dream of up till now. And Gaius Valerius has invited prominent Gauls to use the new bathhouse, donated by their exalted countryman Licinus. It certainly was generous of Licinus to build this bathhouse.
Licinus is always generous with other people's money.
What do you mean?
He has taxed all the Gauls to ruin. But since this does not affect you Romans, perhaps you do not care.
But Licinus must have a plan.
Yes, to become rich. Make no mistake, I have seen his kind before. He would sell out his own people if it would...
Acco Bouvex, my humble master, Licinus, requests the honour of your presence in Marseille 2 days hence, at the 3rd hour after dawn, together with General Gaius Valerius.
See? There you are.
When the fox invites the rabbit to dine, the rabbit should first know the menu.
And therefore, I shall require 2 months' additional taxes from everyone.
Have we not already paid through the year?
That is an interesting point. As the month called December means the 10th, we will add 2 more following it to fill out the year. Of course, in the spirit of harmony, Roman citizens will contribute as well.
That is preposterous.
It is not preposterous if I say it is not.
Surely you cannot mean...
Surely I can mean as I wish. Do not forget yourself, gentlemen. I am Licinus, Procurator of Gaul, the representative of Imperator Caesar Augustus himself.
I tell you, this new tax will not sit well with my people.
Nor with mine, but they will only grumble. You must deal with your countrymen to keep the peace.
Though I am a chieftain, I do not command the loyalty of all.
Such wanton destruction! That's such a great act of generosity. What could it mean to break off the right hand? Who would do such a thing?
Perhaps they who have had it done to them.
But now we all have peace and opportunity under Rome.
Not all the Celts feel that way.
Aidan.
The Druids certainly do not.
The Druids? They hide in the woods and pray to trees. They're all living in the past.
Look, I'll see you tonight. 2nd hour after sunset?
Yes.
And if perhaps your daughter is not otherwise engaged?
My daughter will be pleased to accept your generous invitation.
What?
Set one more place for dinner.
Oh, of course. Why not? Let's have 20 more. No, 30. What's Caesar's army doing? I'm sure there's a garrison that hasn't eaten. Hmm?
Just one moment. I'll see to the delay.
Believe me, Master, I want this to work even more than you do.
What are you talking about?
To impress the young lady into marrying you, heaven help her.
Who said anything about marriage?
I've seen the way you regard her.
I could not marry her. She's not a Roman.
You'd best marry someone, or I shall die of exhaustion. And then you'll have to do your own work.
You're not overly burdened.
I'm a slave. You treat me like a wife. Oh, of course. Why not? Rain.
This large house in Pompeii has a two-story central hall with a roof that is open to the sky so that rainwater can fall into this pool called the impluvium. The water then goes through this hole into an underground tank where it is stored until needed. We're in the home of Paquius Proculus, a local government representative and the owner of several small businesses. Most Roman houses of this size faced inward, away from the street noise. The sleeping rooms and dining rooms were in this, the atrium area of the house. But the most impressive part is out here. Much of Roman life was lived out of doors. The gardens of Pompeii are among the most famous in the world, and every wealthy home had one, surrounded by a covered walkway called a peristyle. On warm days, the master and his family would sit underneath the broad overhanging roof while the gardens soaked up the rain and flourished in the sun.
If you were well-to-do and lived in a prosperous city like Pompeii, that was about as good as life could be in the ancient world. In fact, you could even use your house as an extra source of income. Ground floor rooms that faced the street were often used as shops and rented out by the owner. In several of the houses, we see wine and olive presses, indicating lucrative cottage industries run right from these elegant homes.
What made the wealthy domestic lifestyle work so well, however, was slave labor. Houses like this would have had many slaves to do the cleaning, serving, and other chores. For the most part, the lot of the Roman slave was as deplorable as the lot of all slaves throughout history. Although in cities like Pompeii, some slaves became skilled craftsmen. Others even owned certain industries.
A few slaves were accomplished artists and produced beautiful sculpture and paintings. This impressive residence was once owned by the Vettius brothers, who we think had once been slaves. But this kind of upward social mobility was definitely the exception rather than the rule. Not all cities were as dependent on slaves as Pompeii and Herculaneum.
Ostia was a working-class town, a major commercial city, and the principal seaport to Rome. Though it's silted up now, the river was once lined with ships laden with cargo. At its height, Ostia boasted many warehouses, like this one. It also had scores of shipping companies and a population that reached 100,000 people. In Instead of the lavish townhouses we saw in Pompeii, most people lived in apartment buildings called insulae, which actually translates as islands. Tenants who lived on the upper floors got to their apartments by climbing these stairs. Insulae were made of brick-faced concrete and could hold a dozen or more families. No need for a health club if you lived here. We've clearly left the extravagant lifestyle behind, but these practical, well-built, and essentially fire-resistant buildings would have been affordable, and by the standards of the day, decent places to live. This bar on the ground floor of an apartment block had an excellent view of the street and offered a wide variety of wines for sale. Thank you. And remembering our practical Roman planners, there were public toilets located conveniently throughout the city with separate facilities for both men and women. And on that matter, at least, there must have been some equality between the sexes because archaeologists haven't been able to tell which room was which. I hope I'm in the right one.
Let me through. One side, please.
So much for your vaunted water system.
What are you talking about?
There isn't any. Water from the mountains running to every house. I knew that idea wouldn't work for long.
You say Licinus cut off the water to all private houses? But why?
With the lack of rain, unless there are conservation measures, soon there will be a shortage. So those who require it may now purchase their water from the central reservoir. My servant will collect the money.
This is tyranny. He is bleeding us dry.
Well, Marcus, what do you say of your friend Licinus now?
Licinus is indeed a snake.
Gaius, you must tell Caesar Augustus. You supported him in the civil wars, and he is known to be loyal to those loyal to him.
I will write to Rome this very night.
Augustus receives many letters. You must go to Rome. And take with you a citizen to bear witness, so it will be clear this is no personal argument. Someone honest and without guile.
I know just the one.
It's a tremendous honor that Gaius Valerius has asked me to accompany him to Rome, but I cannot imagine being in the presence of the great emperor himself. Though a citizen of the empire, I had never been to Mother Rome herself. And nothing could have prepared me for the spectacle. We attended a chariot race at the Circus Maximus.
I knew you should have bet on the red team.
I have been to gladiatorial matches before, but none as thrilling as the one in Rome.
I knew you should have bet on the one with the trident.
The next day, we journeyed to the residence of Augustus atop the Palatine Hill. I was surprised by the modest scale of the emperor's house.
Gaius Valerius, my loyal friend, and citizen Marcus Fabricius, you have acted with the public spirit befitting all true Romans. Go with our thanks, and next month, during our tour of inspection in Gaul, you shall have our decision.
It was the best possible news. The Emperor would address our problem when he came to Gaul. I know we will have a satisfactory outcome.
Your faith is reassuring, Master.
Stories came back to us that Caesar Augustus met with Licinus in Marseille.
And what have you to say to these charges, Licinus? There are rumors that monies collected in my name have not reached my treasury.
I have gathered this money purposely, great Caesar, to construct a temple on Vabonia's Forum dedicated in your honor.
And so, for his good work, Licinus was promoted back to Rome as the emperor's official food taster to protect him from poisoning. Here, his formidable Epicurean skills can be devoted to the public good.
With the taxes removed, now perhaps we can run our lives and businesses in peace.
I hope my wife will like the linen I brought from Rome. That woman has such high standards. Rain and lightning from a cloudless sky? Look there. Blackbirds circling in the wrong direction. I don't like these portents. Let us get back to the villa. These woods are not safe at night.
They have insulted our home, our family, and the dignity of Rome.
These Celts will soon see they are no match for the power of Rome, not the Druids, nor all of Gaul.
Gaius Valerius was as good as his word. His measures were swift and harsh, not only against Druids, but against all the Gauls. Acobuvius was sent to labor in the quarries, an example to his countrymen. Now I see no hope of bringing our peoples back together.
By the spirit of Vercingetorix and all who have fallen for Gaul, we will be avenged. The mighty Augustus is coming to Vabonia, but he will not leave. We will be avenged. We will be avenged!
This is the Plaza of the Corporations in Ostia, a long, four-sided promenade built by the local shipping businesses for the pleasure and comfort of the citizenry. Those businesses imported wheat from Egypt, oil and wine from Spain, fish sauce from Portugal, iron ore from the mines of Gaul, and even wild animals from Africa. And in the mosaics which cover the pavement, we can see their corporate logos. Attracting regional and international trade was one of the prime reasons for establishing the city. But not the only one. They were also the centers of culture, and the people strolling this pleasant concourse were probably here during an intermission from one of the most popular spots in town, the theater. Romans loved spectator events, but only cities were large enough to build, support, and fill theaters. Like so much else, the Romans borrowed most of their dramatic themes from the Greeks, modifying them to suit their own tastes and sensibilities. They produced comedies, tragedies, musical reviews. They brought in acrobats, jugglers, pantomimes, and orators to lecture on honor, duty, country, and of course, the glory of being Roman. Virtually all communities had a theater, and some were quite large and impressive. This theater in Orange, France, could hold 10,000 people. It was a gift from Augustus, whose heroic statue still adorns the rear stage wall, decorated with elaborate marble columns. The theater was a popular form of entertainment, drawing many people from the city and the surrounding countryside. But the really big crowds came to the amphitheaters. This huge amphitheater is in Nîmes, not far from Orange. It could easily hold the 24,000 spectators who came here to watch the games. When you first entered the amphitheater, you started in this covered passageway, which rings the entire arena. You get to your seats through these barrel-vaulted tunnels. Some go up to the cheap seats, others go down to the box seats, closer to the action. Like a modern stadium, this is the area where you'd find the snack bars and public toilets. This barrel vault above me does two things. First of all, it creates a covered passageway, but second, it acts as an extended arch to support the tremendous weight above. An amphitheater is actually a circle of barrel vaults that narrow as they lead to the arena. These are connected to rings of passageways that allow movement around the entire structure. The system was so efficient that the whole place could be emptied in 15 minutes. Stone seats rested on top of these vaults, and along the back wall was a series of masts which were rigged to hold a massive canopy called a velarium. We can still see the mast holes for the velarium. It was so large that companies of sailors were kept on duty just to hoist it into position. The velarium provided shade for the patrons from the hot Mediterranean sun so they could better enjoy the spectacle. Brilliant architecture and engineering, all in the service of some of the most depraved notions of entertainment the world has ever known. This is the most famous stadium in the world. The most famous stadium in history, the Colosseum of Rome. As we can see, it still packs them in. I'm in the basement area below the floor of the arena, where people and animals were kept in elaborate staging areas. Using hoists and elevators, they were raised up through trapdoors, appearing as if by magic, much to the delight of all. On game days, trained gladiators fought a series of deadly ritualistic duels. Condemned prisoners were executed in a variety of ingenious ways. And other unfortunates, such as defeated enemies, were torn apart by savage and exotic beasts. By nightfall, hundreds of people and animals lay dead. Why the Romans possessed such a passionate appetite for public pain and slaughter is not an easy question to answer. Many believed order was being maintained when violent criminals were put to death publicly. And the games certainly fit into the Romans' highly militaristic spirit. Another possibility is that the ancient Romans saw so much dying around them, they simply raised its inevitability to a symbolic level, perhaps to make it less fearsome. But whatever the reason, the games were enmeshed in custom and ritual and became the most popular event in Roman society.
So as you might imagine, amphitheater and theater construction was encouraged wherever the Romans settled.
From all reports, the progress of Augustus through Gaul has been most triumphant. But for me, there can be no rejoicing until we are all...
The daughter of the Celtic chieftain.
You must help him, Marcus Fabricius.
But what can I do?
You say he is your friend.
But I am powerless.
What? You want to see Caesar?
Tell him it's Marcus Fabricius, that he received me in Rome.
So, you wish me to pardon this Celt Acco
If you please, great Caesar. Acco has committed no crime, and I know this gesture on your part would do more than all of Gaius Valerius's harsh measures.
What's this all about?
He's to be released.
On whose orders?
Caesar Augustus himself.
Oh, Marcus, you were wonderful.
I am in your debt, Marcus Fabricius.
We each must do what we can.
Yes, we must.
And tomorrow, in the Forum, when he makes an offering at the temple, that is when we shall strike. And in recognition of the loyalty and bravery of your daughter, I bestow upon you and your family the full citizenship of Rome. From this day hence your name shall be Gaius Julius Acco, and you shall be known as Julia.
What's wrong with Aidan?
Now that she was a Roman, I was free to ask her to be my wife. Julia, now that you are...
And Marcus Fabricius, in recognition of your loyalty and splendid achievement in the building of Verbonia, I hereby appoint you supervising architect for all of our new cities on the Phoenician frontier.
Congratulations, Marcus. Good work.
Now that he was a Roman citizen, Acco moved from his hilltop to my house in town. In recognition of the great honor accorded me by the emperor, I granted Lawrence his freedom and a modest pension.
That'll buy me a villa in the south of Gaul. At least I don't have to go to Phoenicia.
Oh, Marcus, I wish...
And so do I.
Along Roman roads like this one came the ideas and commerce that brought a facade of cultural unity to the diverse peoples of the ancient world. Eventually, people from conquered territories became senators, governors, and generals, dressing like Romans, thinking like Romans. In an agricultural world, the city was the crucible of thought and change, a role it would continue to play throughout history.
At public temples and in the quiet of their homes, average Romans prayed to the gods to protect their cities.
In Pompeii, and here in Herculaneum, we can see some of the touches that show how important it was to the Romans that their cities be livable. No private buildings were so high that they blocked all the light from coming into the street. And people who owned buildings on the main streets built roofs and balconies over the sidewalk for the shade and comfort of pedestrians. And notice the elevated sidewalks here at Pompeii. They prevented people from being run over by carts and horses. And these stones not only allowed them to cross the street without stepping into anything, they also served as the world's first speed bumps, since carts would have to slow down to get past them. And look at these grooves made by the carts that travel down these roads over the years. But perhaps the most interesting Roman idea about cities was the stated desire to keep them small. From archaeological evidence, it is clear the city fathers had trouble practicing this theory. Almost all Roman cities quickly outgrew their original plans and needed new aqueducts and sewers and other city services. But Roman engineers, those masters of order and control, knew that a city worked best when it was designed for a given number of people. Once that number was reached, the plan was to build a new city, rather than to stretch and strain the surfaces of the old one. Too bad that idea didn't catch on. The Romans possessed a total vision of life. Much of it was brutal and repulsive, but part of it was brilliantly progressive. Roman achievement in engineering, architecture, and politics was dependent on order and superb organization. And when that order broke down, as it did in the declining centuries of the empire, everything began to decay. But at its height, nothing in the Western world came close to Roman technology and city planning. And it was almost 1,500 years after the collapse of the empire before the world would begin to see its like again.
Major funding for this program has been provided by the National Endowment for the Humanities. Additional funding has been provided by the National Science Foundation, supporting education and research in science, mathematics, and technology. The Arthur Vining Davis Foundations, the American Architectural Foundation, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and by annual financial support from viewers like you.